Awesome. So we've reached time to start. So I'm just going to go quick, introduce who I am. So who am I? Well, that's that's a good question. So I've personally pride myself in pursuing just what certifications are, kind of like looking at like the bigger picture and just wondering like what can I do? Because a lot of times people would want to just settle into one specific cert type or from one specific vendor. For me, I've found that I've had the opportunity to be able to explore the different avenues of what certs would look like and kind of got a better view of, what each cert has to offer. And so we'll definitely talk about this later, but just from my own personal experience, as you can see, the OffSec certs are at the top. I haven't had any other cert provide me with as much satisfaction as just being able to have an OffSec cert, especially with the fact that a lot of certs nowadays expire. The fact that the OffSec certs don't, it's honestly for me like really nice knowing that I don't have to worry about suddenly losing it if I just, you know, don't pay a fee or, don't take a retest or something. So that's something I really appreciate. So my academic experience, I have an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and I'm currently pursuing a PhD in computer and cyber sciences. So I get when it comes to pacing, a lot of my experience I've taken not only from just work, but also like academia, and then kind of integrated that into how you can study while working full time or while being a student full time into just better like understanding the material and also not burning out, because burning out is a real risk when it comes to like intense programs. So it's always good to keep that in the back of your head, be passionate, but don't just wear yourself out to where you're exhausted and you don't want to continue. Because again, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Industry experience. I've worked in research. I've done management. I've done analysis roles. I have like I have the experience in the back portion when it comes to industry to like know the stuff that I'm studying when it comes to OffSec is relevant. It's something where personally, I've found hands-on when it comes to certifications are the best way to go in cyber, because a lot of times cybersecurity is something that you can't just pick up without doing it yourself. You might be able to memorize a lot of things, but when it comes to actively, testing a network in a authorized manner, or when it comes to understanding what the difference between footprinting is, passive reconnaissance versus active reconnaissance, it's something that doing it yourself really helps reinforce it. And personally, I would say that's what I've honestly appreciated best about kind of going through the OffSec courses. So yeah, that's, a quick blurb about me. I would definitely, I don't necessarily think of myself as like, oh, crazy accomplished, because personally, I failed a lot. We'll talk about overcoming failure in another slide, but for me, it's like when I make a mistake or when I fail, it's like I failed the OSEP like 3 separate times, just because I wasn't used to that side of cyber. I was more used to the like reverse engineering side. So it's always like it's a mindset thing. It's like don't let defeat you. Let defeat like teach you a lesson that you can then use to then pick up and move forward. All right. So yeah, so the title that we'll be talking about for this OffSec Live is going to be is content pacing, specifically for working professionals. Our goal here is to basically show that even if you're working a full-time position, regardless if it's in cyber or if it's another industry, there's always a way to move forward to study. Because a lot of times people think that studying can only be done like, oh, it's like, oh, I don't have 5 hours a day. How can I study this? Or I don't have like 3 hours, and that's okay. Even like if you are in a commute where you're maybe on the bus or some public transportation, you could take that time, quickly study up on a concept. And we'll talk about that later, but there's always, if there's a will to accomplish something, there's a way to achieve it. Cool. So we're just going to go and just go through a quick overview of what we'll be discussing. First off, we'll talk about the importance of pacing. Just talking about like why talk about pacing to begin with? Like, why is this a topic of importance? Second, we'll be going through something I call the pacing cycle, where we'll be kind of going through a repetitive loop of different steps that will help someone achieve a goal. Now, it's in the context of OffSec, but this mentality honestly can be applied anywhere. Afterwards, we'll then be talking about employer communication, the importance of like especially if you work in cyber and want your employer to pay for your like subscription, to be able to effectively communicate and be transparent to then both manage your day job, your 9 to 5, and also see if you can integrate that with a subscription plan. Now we'll be talking about several different roadmaps. Now during this talk, after the learn fundamentals, learn one, and I believe it might, I think, yeah. So there's 3 separate times where I'll have like a question slide, and in that question slide, it'll basically be a prompt, and everyone's welcome to respond. We'll select a winner from each of the question slides, and that winner will get a 1-month subscription to PG Practice. So yeah, that kind of helps, it allows definitely for, I would say, for me, when we look at the roadmaps, and we'll go into that further, that roadmaps may vary. So you'll see that the Learn Fundamentals is a lot more broad and I would say introductory and more casual compared to something like Learn Unlimited, where if you have a Learn Unlimited subscription, that's like really intense. It's honestly, if you were to get all the certifications OffSec has to offer in 1 year, that's a full-time job in and of itself. And it would be very, yeah, there's a lot of work like that has to go into being like getting all the certs. So then that's where I break up and say, okay, well, if you have Learn Unlimited, your focus should probably be, trying to get your OSCE 3. Then that's this, just focus on 3 certs and then get the others if you can. And then we'll wrap up. Well, we'll have a Q&A where we can kind of, talk, and I'll answer your questions and go from there. All right. So why is pacing important? Well, as you can see, there's a lot that OffSec has to offer, especially when it comes to even just a Learn Fundamentals subscription all the way up to a Learn Unlimited subscription. So at the top, like in the upper area, you see a bunch of like, oh, cool, fancy cert badges. You see, the OSED, oh, that's cool, the OSDA and all those. And yeah, those are great. But at the same time, that's just, I would say that's like the peak. That's like what everything leads to when it comes to subscription. So it's great. But at the same time, you also have like the supporting structure, the way you get there. And that's where it comes with the learning paths. The learning paths are designed to help someone who's interested or who works in a certain role be able to curate and find content that is applicable to that specific role. For example, there's learning badges, associates learning paths that have things that range from, GitOps essentials to various MITRE ATT&CK framework methodologies, and secure coding, and the list goes on, cloud essentials. And so a lot of times it's important to see that with Learn Fundamentals, Learn One, or Learn Unlimited subscription, you have the option to tailor your learning experience, not only to complement, possibly if you work in cloud, you can start going through the cloud learning paths and then see if you can explore maybe an OSCP either in your free time, or if your employer is okay with it, at work. So that's kind of why we wanted to talk about pacing, is because there's so many options that it can feel overwhelming if you don't necessarily have a set, like, okay, I want to take care of this, and this during the subscription, because if work catches up to you, if you get super busy, everything can just suddenly happen, and it can feel overwhelming if there isn't a pacing mindset established. Cool. So let's talk about the pacing cycle. Well, what's the pacing cycle? That's a good question. So whenever you want to tackle a goal or accomplish some sort of task, it's always good to be invested in it, both analytically and like, emotionally, like something you're excited about. So with the pacing cycle, we want to incorporate not only the analytical, you need to maybe study for this cert, or you need to go down and cover this content in this learning path, but it's like being excited for it. So that's where the first step goes, and it's anticipate. So anticipate is where maybe you're doing something else not related to like studying. Maybe if you're at work and you're at a break, or maybe if you're doing something, if you're sitting on a bus during commute and you're just thinking about like, oh, I can't wait to start this module. This is really exciting for me. Or maybe if you're eating lunch and you're just like thinking about how awesome it'd be to go into directory enumeration, for example. Like if you're wanting to start a module that has to deal with like enumeration, you just would start getting excited about the opportunity that opens up when you like go into that. Like when you're like, oh, I can enumerate, like, oh, there's so many things, and there's so many tools, and it's just, and you get excited for it. And that's the anticipate step. And then you want to take that anticipation. And then when you have like maybe you now have the access to the learning path, or now you have the time set aside to do the studying, that's where you prepare. That's where you say, okay, so today I have 30 minutes or an hour or however much time you have. And you say, okay, in those 30 minutes, in that hour, I want to try and maybe do this exercise. I maybe want to try and watch these videos. And so you pair that with anticipate. So then when you're not actively engaging in the learning, you're still being excited for it. You're still like looking forward to it. And then when you prepare, it's like you start getting ready. And then right before you start, I always suggest right before you start learning, or right before you start like doing something intense, like, because learning is intense. Take 5-10 minutes, just kind of reset everything right before you start. Just, okay. And then you start. And so that covers the anticipate, prepare, break, and begin. Now, the begin portion when it comes to studying is just, okay, so, maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes, however long you had, then you maybe take a small break and then continue studying. So the begin portion covers the period that you study. The rest portion would cover after. So maybe after you accomplished your task, or after you're able to go through that allotted time to study. Then it's like, okay, now you need to rest for a bit, maybe if you have extra time, you can start something else, but it's always important to explicitly set aside time for a break. And then that's just when it comes to studying. However, this also is applicable for taking an exam. So let's just say that you have your OSCP scheduled and you're like, okay, this is crazy. I've never taken a 24-hour exam before. And you also have to write a report. I have another 24 hours for that. So that's 48 hours. That's crazy. Could be a little daunting. But if you anticipate the excitement of it, like you're doing it, you're actually taking the exam, that's pretty exciting, because not a lot of people can say, oh, I took a 24-hour straight exam and then I was able to just even participate. And I think that's another thing that's important to understand, is that it's about the journey that you should be most passionate about than just the destination. So the anticipate part helps prepare you mentally to enjoy the journey, and not just necessarily say, oh, I have to pass. It's like, well, passing is great. But what's more important is, what did you learn to get to pass? And that's where, when it comes to anticipate part, it's just looking forward to that experience. And then the prepare for the exam, obviously the prepare is studying the course content, but more specifically in exam context, the prepare is more just, scheduling the exam time, getting your food ready, for that period of time you're taking the exam. If you're taking it during a work week, making sure that you have vacation set off, or if you're taking it during a weekend, making sure that you have everything in your study space to be able to take that exam for that period of time. And something I've personally found helpful is that right before I take the exam, let's just say like right before I took the OSCP, I found it helpful if I took maybe, if days, a week of just doing nothing, like literally just doing nothing related to studying. I just kind of let it all rest before the actual exam, because personally, I found that if I did try to rush something at the very end, I didn't really retain it. The true test of what I learned was what I studied for, that year before, or those months before. And then the begin part is straightforward. That's where you just begin the exam and you complete it. Rest, this is important if you have like Learn One or Learn Unlimited, because the rest is something where it's negotiable, I could say, because if you have Learn Unlimited, you don't have much time to rest, because you have to just like, if you want to get your OSCE 3 in a year, it's very intense. And for example, with the Learn One, if you want to try to go for the OSWP and the KLCP alongside whatever 200 or 300 level cert you're going for, that also kind of takes some like, I would say some more specific time management than just going straight for one cert and kind of focusing on that. Yeah, so that's kind of the pacing cycle as a whole. Now, obviously it could be applied to other areas as well, but this is something where I found really helps myself when it comes to getting certifications. All right, so another aspect I see that's honestly just as important is employer communication. Now, I understand, like, not everyone works in cyber, not everyone works in the field, and so obviously this is dependent on person's situation, but a lot of times employers may offer programs where they can pay for certifications, or like kind of like extracurricular content, or content that can help a person with their job. So if your company offers that, and if that would be something they'd be willing to pay for, always worth the ask, if you're comfortable, because if that's something the company can do to invest into your future, it definitely like would allow you to then just say, okay, well, if the company was okay with paying for this subscription, maybe I can see if they'd be okay with me studying for it if the schedule's not too busy. And there's a lot of ways that you can communicate with your employer, if you're comfortable, to see if you can integrate your study sessions and your learning experience in a way that you can also perform your job, but also kind of not have to worry that when you get home you have to study. And again, each individual case is different, but that's something that I personally, from my own experience, I found it's always good to just be on the lookout for. And then another thing is, even if you're not working in like cyber right now, but you're at a company and they have a cybersecurity department, or they have something within the company that focuses on cyber, I mean, if you're able to, that'd be something it'd be cool to just explore and see, oh wow, I found cyber really cyber's a passion of mine. Maybe you can see if that's something that your company will be willing to look into. So there's always avenues, and I would say it's definitely per on an individual basis, but it's always like important to at least see different areas you can look out for that may be able to benefit you in your journey. Cool. So honestly, let's now learn fundamentals. So at the end of this slide, we have our first question, and I'll have more explanation on what the question is later, but let's just talk about learn fundamentals first. So learn fundamentals, what is it? Well, it's a year subscription that allows you access to, now we could talk about the specifics more on the site, which I will include. Yeah, so so learn fundamentals, and basically you have the ability to get the OSWP, KLCP, the level 100 badges, and the learning badges per learning path. And so this is where it's at. If you have access to Learn Fundamentals subscription, definitely if you can if you can get your OSWP and KLCP, great. But here it's more, the focus that I've found is that being able to have the learning paths that interest you and exploring those first, it's always something that I find would be important because, for example, if you are working, let's just say in DevOps, and you're interested in what secure coding would be and kind of like looking into, what OffSec can offer in that area, then you can explore those learning paths and then transition and say, okay, I really like secure coding. Now, maybe I want to look into more, web, web 100 and web 200, web 300. So then you can see, okay, so you could take the web 100 course, or if you're interested in the fundamentals of what exploit development is, you can take like the EXP 100 course. There's a bunch of 100 level courses out there. So from my experience, I would say Learn Fundamentals is great, and just kind of like showing you an introduction of, the scope of cyber, how broad and how just and like varied it can be. And this is also great because a lot of times when people are new to cybersecurity, it might be a little intense because you may feel it's like, oh, there's so much going on, it's kind of crazy and feel overwhelmed. And when it comes to learn fundamentals, the great part is you could jump around. If you're interested in red teaming, you can go down and get the learning badge for red teaming. And then you're like, oh, I want to switch. And that's totally fine. You can switch to getting the learning badge for the OWASP top 100, or top 10. And then another thing is there are, right now there's a handful of level 100 badges you can get. It's around a 6-hour non-proctored exam that you can study for. And it's basically you can work through the different modules and exercises and then take the exam. And if you pass the exam, you get a cool badge. So there's a lot. And from my own experience, I would say that the fundamentals is a great way of just getting started and kind of getting into cyber. But yeah, so that actually leads us into our first question. So if you can, in the Twitch chat, just list a few reasons why a Learn Fundamentals subscription would help you with your career goals. And we'll select one person and give them 1 month to PG practice, which is honestly a great way into, figuring out like, hey, is this cyber thing worth it? Like what can I explore within PG practice and what can I see, and kind of go through, the different boxes they have to offer. And I would also say that I'll give an answer for myself. So if I were to have a Learn Fundamentals subscription, I think it would help me explore how vast OffSec has to offer in the learning path and the 100 level content. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very accurate. That's very accurate. A lot of, yeah, no, I would say right now that I've learned more with OffSec than I ever have in like in academia. Because college is so focused on theory over practice that the best part with OffSec is you learn in practice, and the theory comes with it, but it sticks because you learn how it's applied. And I think another thing that's interesting is universities and colleges are now trying to transition to focus more on practice, but it's hard in an academic environment because you don't necessarily have a way of guaranteeing skill level. With OffSec, it's great because you start from like a foundation of, okay, this is 200 level, this is 300 level, and then you build from there. With college, it's like someone might be a transfer student and might be able to, have equivalent credits, so they might not have the practical experience, but they're able to just get in. And so there's a lot of variance that makes it difficult to just have a college that does a really good job with teaching practical cyber versus, I mean, personal experiences. OffSec does a great job because, I mean, I've taken all their courses and absolutely amazing. Cool. So I'm just going to continue on, but feel free just to put your answers in the chat, and let's go on to the next one. So this time with the Learn One versus Learn Fundamentals, there's a little bit more like specific focus, or I would say we're now tailoring it to a 200 level. Like, okay, now we're focused on simply Pin 200, or SOC 200 or Web 200. It's now narrowed down. So personally, I would say, well, first off, make sure if you do get the Learn 100 Learn One subscription, schedule your exams as soon as possible. But like the second that you're able to schedule an exam, schedule your exams. Because I found from experience, it's hard if you wait to schedule your exam and then you need to, and you're like, oh, well, none of my days that I want are available. So the sooner you're scheduled, the better. And a lot of times I would say this roadmap is more a suggestion. You don't necessarily have to follow it this way, but if you, for example, let's just say that you're new to the topics and what's covered in the Pin 100 and Pin 200. So, and maybe if you're new to Kali Linux, then you can start the first 4 weeks can be with the Pin 103, which is the Kali Linux Revealed course. And then that culminates in the 90-minute exam, the KLCP. So the 4 weeks would be a great introduction to what Kali Linux is, the management side behind it. So like as a user, how would you navigate through it? How would you install things? What are the various features and the opportunities that you have within Kali, and what are like the tools you have, readily and something you can use. And that's the first 4 weeks. And the second, so the next step is, let's just say you finish, Kali Linux Revealed, you finish Pin 103, and then you're like, all right, comfortable with Kali Linux, know what I'm doing, let's move on. So now the next 8 weeks, and again, you could shift this however you want. This is just something I found would be helpful for me, is that you choose, or like if you got the OSWA, then you might want to start with Web 100 to then help you with Web 200. Same with, SOC 100 to help you with SOC 200. And so those are sorts of things where, and they have the badges, the 100 level badges for both Pin, SOC, and Web. So the next 8 weeks would just be going through, for example, Pin 100, doing all the exercises, and then taking the timed exam. And then that would help as well, because with the KLCP, the exam length is just 90 minutes. With the Pin or with the 100 series, the length is now, 6 hours. So it helps pacing and sort of figuring out how it helps kind of like it helps to kind of prepare you for the eventual, crazy 24-hour test and then 24-hour to write up. So that's definitely, so the first half would be good with just 100 level, figuring out, getting, okay, so the 6 hours, I'm good. I was able to kind of work out how I study, how I can prepare for it. And even if you don't pass the first time, that's fine. Even if you don't end up getting a badge for the course, you still went through the course. So then you'd move on. And if you have the time and you feel comfortable with going through all of the 200 level course in 30 weeks, you might want to say, oh, well, since I have access to Pin 210 or the OSWP certification, which is the OffSec wireless professional certification, and just go explore that for a bit. But again, for example, if you feel that you should focus as much time as possible with Pin 200 or with the 200 level series, you could honestly just start from the beginning with just straight Pin 200 and then just stick with it for the entirety of your subscription, which is totally fine. So the last bit, or the final 30 weeks before the exam, would be to start and just complete the 200 level course. What that would entail would be simply going through, the videos, the exercises, the extra miles if applicable, the labs, the challenges, and just kind of learning as you go. And make sure, if you do have any questions, the OffSec Discord is readily available to help learners figure out, like, not just straight give the answer. Obviously, it's important for you to, try harder in that trying to, figure out where to go. But if you feel that you've been stuck, or if you're not sure where to go next, you could search and see if someone else has had similar issues as you, and see, like, if there's any pointers that could help you get to that next step. And so that's kind of the overall summary for the 200 level roadmap for Learn One. A lot of it's just up to the time that you have available for yourself. It's not necessarily like there's no rigid way. Again, it's all just, flexible and based off of what you have available. Because, for example, if you work a full-time job that's not in cyber and you can't study at work, then you might just take the entirety of the subscription focusing on the 200 level course. Just because you might have to then set aside the time when you get home to study, and then kind of like work around that. But for example, if your employer is okay and with you studying at work, and you're able to get them to pay for the Learn One subscription, then it would make sense to, okay, now I can spend more time with it. Now I can maybe possibly go for the KLCP. I can look into the 100 level courses. I can also look into the OSWP. So again, it varies per person, but this is just one example of what a schedule could look like. Awesome. So let's have, so we have our next question, and we'll select someone from the Twitch chat who answers this, and they can get 1 month of PG practice. So the question is, describe what 200 level course you are interested in and the reasons why. And I would say for myself, I'm most interested, well, after taking all of them, the one that sticks with me the most probably would be the classic Pin 200 OSCP, because I think it has the most breadth in that it's something where, first off, it's recognized like it is the industry standard when it comes to a penetration testing certification or certificate. And second, it also kind of goes into every area that would make you an OffSec certified professional. With personally from with taking SOC 200, that's great if you work blue team and you want to get kind of focused into that role. And then, with Web 200, that's more of like, web application specific. But I would say if, what 200 level course I'd be interested in, it would be Pin 200. And the reasons why it has also, it has the rich history in that it's something that's been around for over a decade. It also has the breadth that a lot of employers come to expect when it comes to looking for certs, and something that HRs recognize, because once the other 200 level certs have been around long enough, it becomes, all the certs are equal. But when it comes to recognizability, OSCP is definitely like, it's the equivalent of saying, oh, I have a PhD. Everyone knows, what that means. And then I definitely appreciate, like, now that OffSec's growing into the different 200 levels, that's where you can start saying, okay, so now is like, if there's an OS in front of it, it's like, okay, that's something I can trust that, that person has that skill. Cool. So we'll move on to the next slide. So now in the Learn One 200 level roadmap, I was talking about taking all your time and simply focusing on like the cert or the 200 level course itself. With the 300 level, that is something that I genuinely just suggest is done, because the difficulty jump between 200 and 300, it can be pretty intense. When I started, so I did the OSCP first, and when I finished the OSCP, I was like, oh man, I survived the 24 hours, and I did the report, and I got it submitted. Oh, it was crazy. And then when I started my OSWE, it hit me like a train. I failed the first exam, like when the first exam attempt, I just it was horrible. I performed horribly, but I learned so much about the pacing. I learned so much about how to study. I learned so much about applying everything that I've come to discover that with OffSec, failure is part of the process of learning. That by failing, I learn more than I would have ever had if I just only succeeded. And also, now that I have my OSWE, it adds more value to it, knowing how much I struggled through different things, knowing how much I learned, and just seeing like the difference between if I just passed it, great, passing is great, but the struggle and the effort that goes down, like when you actually, you have to like claw your way to the finish line and you have to like, run that marathon. It's a lot more of a sweeter reward for the individual if they've struggled just getting to the part that, the finish line. So I personally, like, if someone passes the OSWE first try, I congratulate them. It's a very hard certification, and that's an amazing achievement. And so when it comes to the 300 level roadmap, again, as with the 200 level, it's important to schedule your exams as soon as possible. Same reasons. If you want to get your ideal time, it's best to do it as far out as you can. So let's see. So let's just go. So you got your Learn One subscription. For example, you're doing your SWE or your Web 300. The first bit would be, from my experience, it would just be watch all the course content, read through everything they have, and kind of take it slow. Slow as in not just going straight into the exercises, not just going straight into the challenges, the extra miles, but more just getting a feel for what's expected of you. So that what that would entail is the first 8 weeks is you just go through the entire course, like literally just like briefly, you just watch all the videos, you just kind of read the material, and if you don't understand something, that's totally fine. You can maybe do some external Googling, but the focus should just be getting through the content, not necessarily mastering it, but just getting a cursory or a first glance out of everything, just to figure out, what there is. And then the next 16 weeks, so after your first 8 weeks, the next 16 would be, now you go through, now you restart to the very beginning, and you just kind of, you do all the exercises. You do all the labs that are all the guided labs. So everything that is kind of walking through. For example, if they have you like walk through specific steps of exploitation in the book itself, that's where you'd follow along. And if you have any issues, then you maybe watch the video, and then you'd read the text, and then you kind of figure out between the two. And if you're really stuck, then you'd look through the Discord, see if anyone has similar issues to you, and kind of go through there. Now, after you've done everything, so after you've completely followed step by step what the book has to offer, then moving into the lab challenges, or like the challenge machines. So not every 300 level course, if I remember correctly, has those right now, but if they do, that's something you'd want to spend the next 8 weeks on going through. For example, with Pen 300, that's where you would start going through the challenges. I know Pen 300 has a challenge labs, and so that's where that's the 8 weeks would be the time of taking everything you've learned up until that point and just applying it, kind of figuring things out, and just going through everything step by step. And then finally, so the next 16 weeks before you take the exam, so the final 16 weeks would be the extra miles. Now, the extra miles are something where, these student mentors, OffSec staff can't necessarily help you with, but the extra miles are very important in being able to fully comprehend, digest, and just understand the material. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to just go through and do the extra miles. A lot of times you might think, oh, well, they're just extra miles, it doesn't matter. From experience, it helps just cement everything that you've learned. The extra miles are the best way to show and prove to yourself that you understand the material you're going through, and that it's something that you can say you mastered, just because you're like, I did this myself. It gives a sense of pride and accomplishment. I would then say you'd want to, at this point, just be fully prepared exam mindset, where after you finish all the extra miles, you'd want to be like, all right, so now I have the extra miles done. I've done all the lab challenges. I've gone through all the course extras. I'm ready. So this is where you'd say, okay, maybe it's a week before you take the exam, just complete break, just just kind of just relax, just kind of zone out, just kind of let everything kind of get settled down, because it's always important to have a couple days buffer between when you finish your last bit of studying and when you take the exam. Because from what I found, if I have to go straight from studying to exam, there's a lot of just things that I might miss, because it's the equivalent of study sleep, where it's important to let your brain reset. And so going through and just taking a week break before you take the exam would be the equivalent of just just sleeping it off, just taking a quick, okay, all right, I'm ready. And that's where you take your exam. Yeah, so it's definitely different from the 200 level. And it's also similar because the same approach you would take for the 200 level would be like, okay, well, now I need to, if you're working full time with 200 level, that's the same approach you would take just for a 300 level, like for everything. Awesome. So this leads us into our third question. So if you can, so just list a few examples of how you can pace yourself when studying for a 300 level certification. We'll pick someone who in Twitch chat who's answered, and they can get a 1-month subscription to PG Practice. For me personally, I would say that when it comes to pacing myself, an example would be when I'm going through like a challenge, like one of like the challenges for Pin 300 would be to allocate a week and be like, okay, this week I want to go through the challenge, whatever challenge I have. And then the pacing would be, okay, within that week, how can I break up my time to be able to kind of work through it, but not too much? Like, let's just say I only have an hour each day, or I have 2 hours, or I have 2 hours on the work days, and then 4 hours on the weekends. And so it's like, okay, so in a week and 7 days, I will just focus on saying I want to be at this point by Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday I want to do these things. So that would be an example of example of pacing yourself for a 300 level certification. Would just kind of be taking something and just breaking it down time wise and saying, by working full time, I might need, to kind of figure things out a little like at a different rate than if I could focus on this, so like have this as my thing that I solely focused on. But yeah, cool. So we're going to kind of finish this up with talking about the Learn Unlimited. So Learn Unlimited, incredibly intense. This is something where if you want to make the most out of your Learn Unlimited subscription, you're going to have to go in with the mindset of there's going to be a lot of failure if just because of how intense it is. What I mean by failure is like you only spend like a couple weeks studying for a cert, and you try to take the cert exam, and if you don't make it, you just like restudy or move on to the next one. Because a lot of times the cooldown for Learn Unlimited subscription, Learn Unlimited users is shorter than it is for Learn One or the 90-day bundles. So definitely OffSec has that resource on the website. So look into the exam cooldowns. But with Learn Unlimited, you want to take a very fast pace and like just kind of focused approach of tackling as much as you can. So let's say we start with, first off, schedule our exams as soon as possible. Now, when it comes to Learn Unlimited, a lot of exams. So you're going to have like a lot of different dates to keep track of. But for example, if you want to aim for the OSCE 3 and you have the ability to work on Learn Unlimited with your employer, while you're at work, that's where it'll be like, all right, so for example, you'd say, I want to do my OSWP, so I'm going to do that quickly, first 4 weeks. I want to spend the next 8 weeks getting a 200 level course, so go focus on that. And then for the next 12 weeks, maybe you focus on OSEP or PIN 300. Next 12 weeks after that, you focus on EXP 301 or the OSED. And then final 12 weeks, you focus on Web 300 or the OSWE. Now, if you have to take a little bit more of time, that's totally fine because very intense. So that's where maybe you just take out the OSWP and the 200 level, and you start with OSEP, and then you break up your subscription into 3 parts. And the first part you focus on one cert, second part you focus on your next cert, third part you're in final cert. And then the goal would be by the end of that year or by the end of that subscription period, you would have that OSCE 3. So that's one of the focus or one of the approaches you can do. And the next step you can take is, let's just say you're like, well, I'm not necessarily interested in my OSCE 3, or maybe you already have your OSEP and your OSWE. What you can do is you can now focus maybe on the exploit development side. So the first 2 bits are the same, so the OSWP and then the 200 levels. But now it's like, okay, now I want to explore EXP 312 or the OSMR, which is the Mac OS Researcher course and certification. And then you can then still go with have that time set aside for your OSET and OSWE, but you'd switch out one of them for the OSMR just to explore that avenue and look into that. So there's a lot, and I would say if you have Learn Unlimited, your focus should be on trying to get as many certs as possible and not necessarily worry about failing an exam, just because just the way Learn Unlimited is set up is you're able to kind of go at a faster pace. Yeah. So quick conclusion. First off, working with your employer is important because oftentimes now each individual case is different, but sometimes the employer may offer programs where they could be willing possibly to pay for a subscription to learn fundamentals or Learn Unlimited. And second, taking time to jump between different things. Let's just say if you're taking a 300 level course and you're stuck in this one specific module, even if you feel like, oh, this is crazy, I've been here for a bit and I just don't feel progress, just jump to the next module. Especially in that first 8 weeks when you're just going through everything, it's okay just to jump something and to move on to the next one, because eventually you'll go through it back again when you do the exercises themselves. And third would just be, it's always important to take breaks. Taking breaks is incredibly necessary with intense material like this. Just keep in mind, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So there's always that time that just I need to focus on just the next step ahead. Don't focus solely on the finish line. Finish line is great, but at the end of the day, the enjoyment and the satisfaction comes from the journey. And then finally, just make sure to have fun. This is something where I started my OffSec journey back in July of 2021, and I've just had a blast since. I mean, yeah, I've definitely had issues where I failed my exams before, and I've had to focus on okay, how do I take that next step to make sure not to fail? And even if I do, that's fine. And it's just that's where for me, it's always a mindset thing. It's you're here to have fun. This is something to enjoy doing. And don't just solely focus on, oh, I have to get a cert. It's the cert's great, but make sure at the end just to be it's an awesome experience just to be able to learn so much about cyber and see what's everything that's out there. So, cool. So this is time where if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me. And yeah, so we have about 10 minutes remaining, and so now it's just Q&A. I think personally, out of all the certs that I have taken and all the courses I've taken with OffSec, the most fascinating for me, I would say definitely the EXP 312 or the macOS Researcher one's good, but when it comes to 200 level, the most different from my end, something I had to really focus on learning would be the SOC 200. Just because I don't come from a blue team background, so I wasn't necessarily, I had to completely shift focus of just code review and all of this to actually just looking for what you would do in a SOC, or what you would do kind of, as a blue team member. So that's always been something I found quite honestly fascinating. Yeah. So, okay. It took me honestly a year and a half. I got bored one day and I was like, I want to see how much I can just do. And so I just sat down and I just started looking for every single opportunity that I can just take a cert exam, or get a badge on Credly, or just do something that can like kind of explore what certifications are. So I would say, yeah, so it took me it took me a year and a half, but in that time it was more just kind of me sitting down to figure out, like, I wanted to get to the bottom of what would be considered a cybersecurity certification, or what would be considered a computer science certification, because that's a relatively new concept compared to your educational degrees, your bachelor's, your associates, your master's, your doctorate. And so it was more of a passion of mine, is to figure out what companies offer, and when they say cert, what does it mean? Because a lot of times certifications can be so vast and so different that it is really cool to see that. For example, I have a couple, well, I have a lot of certs that I got from IBM, and their approach to certifications completely different than what the Linux Foundation has, and the Linux Foundation's approach is completely different from other ones. So it's honestly, like, it's fascinating. With the Web 200 content, so I would say, okay, uh, so do you have uh access? Do you have Learn and Learn subscription where you can look at both the Web 200 and Pin 200 exercises? Since you already have taken all the OffSec courses, which course or certification is most challenging? Okay. Uh, I would say EXP 401. That's the one that I've had. My notes are over 736 pages. Just notes. That's by far the most difficult for me. Okay, yeah, with Learn Unlimited, I would suggest focus on, like, have your exam focus first, and then kind of let the content dictate where you need to go. For example, take both OSCP and OSWA, and based off of based off of how comfortable you are with the exam itself, then just figure out, oh, maybe I want to study more on web, or maybe I want to more study on Active Directory and the Pin 200 content. So with the Learn Unlimited, you want to kind of focus on just taking as many exams as possible. And if you fail, that's totally fine. Just because, again, with the OffSec website, it's important to look at the cooldowns on the web page, but the cooldowns are different for Learn Unlimited. So I was able to get most of the certs in 1 year, just because I just kind of shifted to, if I fail this exam, let me just take this real quick. If I fail this exam, I'm just going to now look at kind of how can I improve myself, and I'm going to study these areas that I had issues in. So I use the exams more as like a spot check to see I'm comfortable with these areas, but I need to focus on those. Bug bounties. So I would say when it comes to going after, like, issues in software that like vendors have right now, like that's its own area. So OSWA is great at teaching you the fundamentals of black box web assessment, which can align with certain bug bounty programs. Now, I'm not here to say if you have your OSWA, you're guaranteed to find a bug. That it's not necessarily, from experience, I wouldn't say that would be right to say, because bugs can be so varied and so different and so unique. I would say what the OSWA helps with is opening up your mind to question how things work, and how to bypass things, or how to break things, or how to train your mind in such a way that you can then look into the more advanced topics to try to explore ways that you can identify bugs. So I would say, honestly, every OffSec cert would help with your job. If your job is bug bounty hunting, if your job is blue team, red team, penetration testing, exploit development. So definitely I would say the OffSec certification helps teaching you the mindset, teaching you the intensity needed to succeed. I couldn't say like exactly like, there's so many bugs out here that focus in this specific area, but it's definitely helpful in just teaching you how to get the mindset to achieve those outcomes. And I would say for the 300 level, the most difficult for me would be pin 300, just because my background is not in just network penetration testing. So, okay. I think it depends on, I haven't, so when I was doing my OSCP, I didn't necessarily have like, it was a while ago, so I don't have just like definitive this would be best. What I can say is if you go through and like you're looking at the OffSec Discord and you can like see what helped the community or like kind of helped what your peers are at. So if there's someone that says, oh, this was specifically helpful when I was doing this, that's like, I would say probably look and see what other people who are in your situation found helpful, and kind of go from there, because any hands-on experience is great experience. So I definitely say that like the PG practice and PG play are great at just like getting your hands kind of like into what cyber is. But when it comes to specifics on like what would be explicitly beneficial for OSCP, I wouldn't necessarily know off the top of my head, but I could definitely say I'm sure like there's already there could be conversation like within the Discord that might help you. And then I would also say that for the 200 level courses, probably the hardest for me was, oh yeah, no problem. Glad I can help. I so you'll have to reach out to OffSec themselves when it comes to exam scheduling. I don't necessarily have the information for that. But yeah, if you were to reach out to OffSec to ask about the exam information or like kind of scheduling that, that'd probably be the best approach. Yeah, no, there's a lot of open source like resources and available like things that you can do to help study for OSCP. Personally, I found that a lot of times it always helps to kind of go through the same thing over again. Now, this like for example, when I was taking my when I was going through Web 300, I might complete an exercise by just following what the text has and then watching the video and doing it myself, and then I repeat it, but this time I don't watch the video and I don't read the text, and I just do it based off of, hey, I'm just going to try to do it myself without referencing anything. And that has helped a lot, because even though I already knew how to do it, doing it myself and not relying on the resource to guide me has actually been really interesting. Do you recommend doing the PG boxes? I would say if you have limited time, focus solely on like the hands-on material of going through doing the exercises, going through all the hands-on for OSCP specific. So if there's an OSCP specific challenge machine or OSCP specific or pin 200 specific, not OSCP, but pin 200 specific challenge machine or pin 200 specific box that you need to go through, definitely prioritize going through material, because that's what would be the best for pin 200. So I would say that external resources are great, but when it comes to kind of, which course is more aligned to provide knowledge? So That depends. I could say that if you're interested in web apps, that the web series, so Web 300, Web 200, Web 100, is great at teaching you how to discover issues in both source code and a more black box approach. So those would be something if you want to go into web. I would say with exploit development, it's not necessarily, so you don't go into fuzzing, you don't go into all those like more advanced topics. What you would do is you more understand on a binary level how program works, various security mitigations that are implemented, and then various bypasses that have been discovered on how to circumvent those. Specifically with like EXP 312, that's like a different like way it goes about it than just EXP 301. So the way EXP 301 and EXP 312 go about teaching the content is very unique. So if you're really comfortable with EXP 301, you might find yourself challenged with 312 and vice versa. But yeah, I think so. This is about it. Any more questions? Awesome. How do you stay focused while studying? I embrace getting distracted. Now that might sound weird, but for me, when I'm studying, I feel like I get distracted a lot. So oftentimes I just kind of let myself get distracted for 30 seconds and then just kind of redirect. So let's just say if I'm studying and I'm 5 minutes in, I'm getting distracted, I'm like, okay, I'll just give myself 30 minutes to kind of do my own thing. And then at the end, or sorry, not 30 minutes, 30 seconds. And then at the end of those 30 seconds, I'm like, okay, I need to go back. So oftentimes I've found that just allowing the action of moving my brain to something else and then quickly redirecting it helps a lot more than just trying to prevent it altogether. So for example, after 30 seconds, I might then shorten it to 20 seconds. I might shorten that to 10. So then I can still train myself to, okay, so I'll do 5 minutes of this and my brain's like drifts for like 30 seconds, like, oh, let me redirect it back. But it's always letting my brain kind of like move and not just saying, oh, I can't get distracted. It's I will, but for a very short period of time. How many hours do I spend on 200 level courses? Yeah, so that was something where I was fortunate enough to where my job let me study. So if you have to allocate time outside of work to study, that would be something where it depends per person. If you have a background in computer, like in cybersecurity, it helps. You don't have to necessarily spend as long studying. If you're new to the field, you might have to spend more time. So it depends per person, but I would say that definitely focus on your full-time job first. Number one most important thing. And when you do have time to study, try and casually study. Now, what I mean by that is oftentimes it may be helpful if you just listen to the course content while taking a break, like playing video games. Like for me, the first 8 weeks when I was going through content, I just I just let the video play and I'd like play some video games and just kind of let it soak in. So then when I did the exercises, I was already familiar enough where I didn't have so many things that were like causing, oh, I've never heard of this term. It's like, well, I remember I was watching that video just casually. And so it's when you integrate your studying into when you take a break from your full-time job. So like on the weekends, it's like just find ways to make studying fun. You don't have to just like just sit and just go through everything. It's like maybe if you go out go out and take a walk or something, you can like print out like a page or something, just like look at the page while you like walk. So there's just like creativity helps take away the burden it might feel sometimes when you're like, oh, it's Saturday, I have to study. It's, oh, I can find this new creative approach to kind of like just passively look at information while I do my own thing. And then pretty soon you get more passionate and excited about it. And then you'd like say, oh, I actually want to spend this time and do something. And so a lot of it is just training your brain to kind of like associate studying with, you could just be creative. You don't have to just sit down at a desk and study. You can kind of like go about it different ways. And when you do the exercises and the challenges and the challenge labs, well, definitely that you have to, like, might have to sit down, but you might be going to like a coffee shop, or you can like change locations, go to a library. So there's so many different ways to approach it that, like, I definitely say make sure, especially if you have a full-time job on top of studying, to always like kind of spruce up the studying to where it's more of a break than it is a second job. Awesome. Well, awesome questions. I was definitely had fun time. And yeah, no, thanks again, everyone. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, small goals are better because it's like, this is a marathon. So like the pacing of, yeah, no, completing, yeah, just subsections. No, yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Cool. But yeah, thanks again. So I want to say thank you, and try harder.